It was a quiet evening, and Nathan had just returned home after a long day at work. The house was eerily silent, but he thought nothing of it at first. Rachel, his wife of 10 years, often took time to herself in their bedroom to relax after dinner. But as he set his keys on the kitchen counter, something unusual caught his eye. A pair of wine glasses on the dining table, one with lipstick smudged along the rim and the other nearly empty. His brow furrowed. They hadn't planned a dinner together tonight, and Rachel hadn't mentioned having anyone over. Shrugging it off, he grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, but the faint sound of muffled laughter drifted down the hallway, freezing him in place. Nathan's heart began to pound, a dull thudding in his chest. The sound wasn't coming from the living room or the guest room. It was coming from their bedroom. His stomach churned as he set the bottle down, walking cautiously toward the noise. Each step felt heavier than the last, the laughter growing louder, more distinct. He could hear Rachel's voice, light, playful, flirtatious, and another voice, deeper, unmistakably male. He stopped outside the slightly ajar bedroom door, his breath catching in his throat. Through the small gap, he caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow crossing the dimly lit room. His mind raced with explanations, each one more desperate than the last. Maybe it was just a friend. Maybe it was innocent. But then he heard something that shattered every ounce of denial he clung to. The man's voice, low and smooth, said, "You're lucky he's too busy to notice. He doesn't deserve you." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. He pushed the door open slowly, silently, revealing a scene that burned itself into his memory. Rachel was sitting on the edge of their bed, her hand resting on the arm of another man, Ethan, their neighbor, and someone Nathan had shared beers with on more than one occasion. They both froze when they saw Nathan standing in the doorway. Rachel's face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for the right words. Ethan stood, his face flushed with guilt, his hands raised in a pathetic attempt to diffuse the tension. "Nathan, it's not what it looks like," Rachel stammered, her voice shaky. Nathan didn't say a word. He stood there, his chest heaving, his gaze burning into both of them. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Every memory, every moment of their marriage flashed before his eyes. The sacrifices he had made, the trust he had placed in her, all crumbling in an instant. "Not what it looks like?" Nathan finally spoke, his voice low and icy. "So, I'm not standing here in my own house, watching my wife cozying up to another man." Ethan took a step forward, his palms out as if to calm Nathan. "Man, let's just talk about this." Nathan's glare stopped him in his tracks. "Get out," he said, his tone deadly calm. "Now!" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Rachel, who nodded quickly. He grabbed his coat from the chair and hurried past Nathan without another word. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, leaving Nathan and Rachel alone. Rachel started to speak, tears welling in her eyes. "Nathan, I can explain." "Don't," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through her excuses. "You don't get to explain. Not tonight." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Rachel sitting there, stunned. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But he knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Nathan wasn't a weak man. He wouldn't scream, cry, or beg for answers. No, he would take his time. He would let her think she had gotten away with it. And then, when the moment was right, he would make sure she regretted every choice she had made. Nathan didn't confront Rachel the next morning. Instead, he played along, pretending nothing had changed. She tiptoed around him, her nervous glances and forced small talk betraying her unease. But Nathan was careful not to give anything away. He was biding his time. That evening, after Rachel had gone to bed, Nathan stayed in the living room with his laptop. The first thing he did was access their shared bank account. Rachel had always handled most of the finances, claiming she was better at managing their bills and expenses. At the time, Nathan hadn't thought twice about it. Now he wondered what secrets might be hiding there. It didn't take long for him to spot the inconsistencies. There were unexplained withdrawals, small enough to avoid suspicion, but frequent. There were also charges for restaurants he had never been to, spa treatments he hadn't known about, and gifts he hadn't received. His jaw tightened as he stared at the screen, the betrayal cutting deeper than he had anticipated. Nathan knew he needed more information. He installed monitoring software on their home computer and set up a tracker for her phone. It wasn't something he had ever imagined himself doing, but Rachel had left him no choice. If she wanted to lie and cheat, he would ensure every detail of her deception was exposed. Over the next few days, Nathan began piecing together the truth. He checked her text messages, emails, and call logs. The messages with Ethan were casual on the surface, but the undertone was undeniable. They joked about him, his busy schedule, his cluelessness. One message from Ethan made Nathan's blood boil. "He's so focused on work, he doesn't even notice. We're practically living the dream." Nathan clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain calm. He couldn't afford to lose his composure. Not yet. The first clues of a bigger betrayal. Nathan began noticing patterns. Rachel's weekly yoga nights coincided with charges from a nearby luxury restaurant. Her weekend errands lined up with Ethan's frequent text updates. But the most damning evidence came one Saturday afternoon when Nathan checked the tracker on Rachel's phone. She had told him she was meeting a friend for coffee, but her location showed otherwise. She was at a boutique hotel just a few miles from their house. Nathan grabbed his keys and drove there, parking a few spots away from Ethan's car. He stayed in his vehicle, watching from a distance. An hour later, Rachel emerged with Ethan, laughing and holding his arm as they walked to his car. Nathan snapped photos with his phone, his hands steady despite the rage bubbling inside him. Gathering the evidence. Nathan knew he couldn't rely on his own observations alone. He needed solid, irrefutable proof. He contacted a private investigator, a man named Eric, who specialized in uncovering infidelity. Eric was thorough. Within days, he provided Nathan with surveillance footage, financial records, and even recordings of Rachel and Ethan together. One of the recordings was from a conversation they had at the same boutique hotel. Rachel: "Do you think he suspects anything?" Ethan: "Not a chance." Nathan's too busy working himself to death to notice. Rachel: "Good. I don't want to deal with the drama. He can keep working, and we'll keep enjoying the perks." Nathan's grip on the recorder tightened, but he forced himself to listen. Every word was another nail in the coffin of their relationship, but it also fueled his resolve. They thought he was clueless, weak, and easy to manipulate. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Getting her think she's safe. Nathan continued to act as if everything was normal. He greeted Rachel with the same polite tone, laughed at her jokes, and even agreed to her suggestion of a weekend getaway to reconnect. He could see the relief in her eyes, the way she began to relax. She thought she had him fooled. At night, when Rachel was asleep, Nathan and Eric worked on the final details of his plan. It wasn't enough to catch her cheating. He wanted to expose the depth of her betrayal in a way she'd never recover from, and he wanted Ethan to pay just as much. Nathan's patience paid off when he uncovered one last piece of evidence. Ethan had been encouraging Rachel to push for a divorce. In an email, Ethan had written, "If we handle this right, we can take him for everything. The house, the savings, he'll be too broken to fight back." Nathan stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. They weren't just betraying him, they were planning to ruin him. But what they didn't realize was that Nathan had already turned the tables. They were living on borrowed time, and every move they made was playing directly into his hands. Nathan sat in his study, surrounded by the mountain of evidence he had gathered over the past weeks. The photos, text messages, financial statements, and surveillance footage painted a picture that was more damning than he had ever imagined. Rachel wasn't just unfaithful, she was calculating, manipulative, and cruel. And Ethan? The man who had shared beers with him and laughed at his jokes was nothing more than a conniving opportunist. As Nathan flipped through the stack of photos, he paused on one taken at the boutique hotel. Rachel's smile was wide and carefree, her hand resting on Ethan's arm as they walked to his car. It was a smile Nathan hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't for him. For the first time since discovering the affair, Nathan allowed himself to feel the weight of the betrayal. He thought about everything he had sacrificed for Rachel: the late nights at work, the missed vacations, the endless effort to provide her with a life of comfort and stability. He had trusted her with his heart, his future, and his dreams, only to have it all thrown back in his face. Memories that cut deep. Nathan's mind wandered to their wedding day. He remembered the way Rachel had looked at him as they exchanged vows, her eyes filled with promise and love. He had believed her then, believed in their future. But now he realized those moments had meant more to him than they ever did to her. The pain wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the years of pretending, and the realization that she had never truly valued him. She had used his hard work and dedication as a foundation for her deceit, and that cut deeper than anything else. Anger fuels the plan. But the pain didn't break Nathan. It strengthened him. As he sat in the dimly lit study, his anger began to take shape, transforming into determination. He wasn't going to let Rachel and Ethan destroy him. They thought they were clever, but they had underestimated him. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. He could expose them publicly, humiliate them in front of their friends and family. Or he could dismantle their plans quietly, stripping them of everything they had schemed to take from him. One thing was certain: he wasn't going to confront them yet. Rachel needed to feel safe, confident that her lies were holding up. The longer she thought she was in control, the more devastating the final blow would be. A conversation of lies. The next evening, Rachel approached Nathan in the living room, a tentative smile on her face. "I was thinking," she began, sitting beside him, "we should plan a trip, just the two of us. We haven't spent much time together lately." Nathan forced himself to smile, playing the part of the oblivious husband. "That sounds like a great idea," he said, keeping his voice light. "Where were you thinking?" "Maybe the coast," Rachel said, her eyes bright with hope. "A little beach getaway to relax and reconnect?" Nathan nodded. "Let's do it. We could both use the break." Rachel reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm so glad we're on the same page again, Nathan. I've missed this." He didn't pull away, but he didn't return the gesture either. Inside, his rage simmered just beneath the surface. She was a master of manipulation, crafting a narrative to keep him blind and compliant. But he wasn't blind anymore. Fueling curiosity and suspense, Nathan spent the next few days carefully planting seeds of his plan. He casually mentioned meeting with his financial advisor, knowing it would make Rachel nervous. He also dropped hints about reorganizing their joint accounts, watching as her smile faltered ever so slightly. Each move was calculated, designed to make her second-guess herself while still believing she was safe. And as Nathan continued to gather evidence and solidify his plan, he felt the balance of power shifting in his favor. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, it fueled him, giving him the clarity and strength to see his plan through to the end. Rachel and Ethan thought they had everything under control. They thought Nathan was too weak to fight back. But what they didn't realize was that he wasn't just fighting back. He was about to destroy their entire world. Nathan knew the key to his plan was patience. Rachel needed to believe she was untouchable, that her lies and deception were hidden beneath a perfect facade. And so, he became the dutiful husband once more, careful not to let his simmering rage show. At breakfast, he joked about work. At dinner, he asked about her day, nodding thoughtfully as she fabricated details about errands and yoga classes. All the while, Nathan watched her closely, every small hesitation and forced smile confirming that she thought she had him fooled. Ethan's overconfidence too, seemed emboldened. Nathan would occasionally catch glimpses of him in the neighborhood, casually strolling past their house as if he owned it. One evening, Nathan stood at the window watching as Ethan paused near the driveway, his phone pressed to his ear. I'm telling you, Rachel, he has no idea, Ethan said, his voice carrying just enough for Nathan to hear. We're golden. Just stick to the plan. Nathan's lips curled into a cold smile. Let him believe it. Let him think he's won. It would only make the fallout that much sweeter. Planting doubts. Nathan started making small moves to rattle Rachel without revealing his hand. One evening, he casually mentioned their bank accounts during dinner. I've been thinking, he said, cutting into his steak. We should meet with a financial planner. Consolidate everything. Make sure we're on the same page. Rachel's hand froze mid-air, her fork hovering over her plate. Oh, sure, she said, her voice a touch too high. That's a good idea. Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. It's just that some of the recent transactions don't look familiar. I thought we could go over them together. Her smile wavered, but she quickly recovered. Of course. Just let me know when. The illusion of normalcy. Rachel began doubling down on her act. She suggested date nights, planned small surprises, and even left handwritten notes on Nathan's desk saying, I love you, and I'm so grateful for everything you do. Nathan kept each note, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of her audacity. Every word she wrote, every false smile, only strengthened his resolve. Behind the scenes, Nathan worked tirelessly with Eric, the private investigator. Eric had tracked Ethan's movements and discovered that he wasn't just a neighbor with poor morals, he had a history of predatory behavior. Ethan had been involved in multiple affairs, each time targeting women married to financially stable men. His pattern was clear: seduce, manipulate, and profit. The final pieces of the puzzle. One evening, Eric handed Nathan a folder containing the last piece of evidence he needed, a series of text messages between Rachel and Ethan. In one, Ethan had written, "Once the divorce is finalized, we'll be set. He'll never see it coming." Rachel had responded, "He's so busy, he doesn't have time to notice anything. We just need to stay careful." Nathan clenched the folder tightly, his jaw set. They thought they had outsmarted him, but they had only played into his hands. Every lie they told, every move they made, had only helped him build an airtight case, setting the stage. With all the evidence in place, Nathan began preparing for the final act. He contacted a lawyer, ensuring that Rachel would have no claim to the house, the savings, or any of his assets. He also reached out to a few key figures in their social circle, friends who would serve as witnesses to what was about to unfold. But the pièce de résistance was the dinner party Rachel had suggested weeks ago. She wanted to host a gathering for friends and neighbors, a night of laughter and celebration. Nathan had agreed, knowing it would be the perfect stage for his reveal. As the day of the party approached, Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. Rachel and Ethan thought they were safe, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The evening of the dinner party arrived, and Rachel was in her element. She flitted around the house, arranging centerpieces, lighting candles, and ensuring the wine glasses sparkled. Nathan watched her from the corner of the room, a faint smile on his lips. She had no idea this night wasn't for celebration. It was for reckoning. Guests began arriving, filling the house with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Nathan greeted each person warmly, shaking hands and making small talk. He played the perfect host, ensuring no one suspected the storm brewing beneath the surface. The calm before the storm. Rachel basked in the attention, laughing and chatting with their friends as if nothing was amiss. Ethan arrived late, as expected, his confident smirk barely concealed. Nathan felt a wave of disgust, but quickly masked it, offering Ethan a drink and patting him on the back as if they were still friends. The evening unfolded smoothly, with guests mingling and the sound of music filling the air. Nathan waited patiently, letting the night build to its peak. Rachel was relaxed, her guard completely down, and Ethan was emboldened by the false sense of security Nathan had given him. The moment of truth. At the perfect moment, Nathan stepped to the center of the room and tapped his glass with a fork, the sound ringing out sharply. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to him. Rachel smiled warmly, thinking he was about to thank everyone for coming. Thank you all for being here tonight, Nathan began, his voice steady and commanding. I wanted to take a moment to share something personal, something important. Rachel's smile faltered slightly, her brow furrowing in confusion. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the door. For the past few months, Nathan continued, I've been dealing with something that no one should ever have to face. Betrayal. Betrayal by the two people I trusted most in the world. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests like a heavy blanket. Rachel's face went pale, and Ethan's confident smirk disappeared. Nathan turned to face Rachel, his expression cold and unforgiving. Rachel, my loving wife of 10 years, and Ethan, my trusted neighbor and friend, have been having an affair behind my back. Gasps rippled through the room, and Rachel took a step forward, stammering, Nathan, Save it! Nathan cut her off, his voice sharp. You've already said enough, and so has he. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small remote, clicking a button. A screen on the wall came to life, displaying photos, text messages, and even video footage of Rachel and Ethan together. The room erupted in murmurs and gasps, and Rachel's eyes filled with tears. The fallout begins. Nathan didn't stop there. He pointed to the screen, his voice unwavering. This isn't just about an affair. This is about the lies, the manipulation, and the plans to take everything I've worked for. You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought I was too busy, too distracted. But you underestimated me. He turned to Ethan, who looked like he wanted to disappear. And you, Nathan said, his tone dripping with contempt. You're nothing more than a parasite, preying on the trust of people who welcomed you into their lives. I've already sent all of this evidence to the authorities. Your days of scamming people are over. The crowd was stunned into silence, watching as Rachel broke down in tears, her carefully curated facade crumbling. Ethan tried to leave, but Nathan's private investigator, Eric, stepped into his path, blocking the door. You're not going anywhere, Eric said, his voice firm. The room turns against them. Nathan looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each guest. I invited you all here tonight not just to expose the truth, but to make one thing clear. I will not be taken advantage of. Actions have consequences, and Rachel and Ethan are about to face theirs. One by one, the guests turned their backs on Rachel and Ethan. Friends who had once admired Rachel's charm now whispered behind her back, their judgment clear. Ethan's attempts to talk his way out of the situation were met with cold stares and silence. Nathan's closing words. Nathan raised his glass, his hand steady. To truth, he said, his voice steady, and to never underestimating the wrong person. With that, he walked out of the room, leaving Rachel and Ethan to face the fallout alone. He didn't need to stay and watch. He had already won. The fallout from the dinner party was swift and brutal. By the following morning, Rachel and Ethan's betrayal had become the talk of the neighborhood. Word spread quickly among their friends, colleagues, and even extended family. The perfect facade Rachel had built over the years crumbled entirely, leaving her exposed and isolated. Rachel's collapse. Rachel tried to salvage what was left of her reputation, but the evidence Nathan had presented was irrefutable. Her pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears, and the friends who had once admired her charm now avoided her entirely. She reached out to Nathan repeatedly, leaving long, tearful voicemails. Nathan, I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. Please call me. I need to explain, one of her messages said. But Nathan never responded. Her calls and texts went unanswered, and the silence only deepened her desperation. She quickly discovered that life without Nathan's support wasn't just lonely, it was unsustainable. Nathan had already ensured that Rachel had no claim to the house or their savings. With the divorce finalized, she was left with nothing but her personal belongings. Forced to move out, she rented a small apartment on the other side of town, far from the life of comfort she once knew. Ethan's downfall. Ethan's life unraveled even faster. The evidence Nathan had gathered wasn't just limited to the affair. It also exposed Ethan's history of deceitful behavior. Nathan's private investigator had uncovered fraudulent real estate deals and a trail of unpaid debts, which Nathan passed along to the authorities. Within weeks, Ethan faced criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. His once charming persona couldn't save him from the weight of the evidence. He lost his job, his social connections, and any chance of rebuilding the life he had so carefully schemed to create. The final blow came when Ethan's wife, whom he had kept hidden from the neighborhood, filed for divorce, taking what little he had left. Rachel's attempts at redemption. Rachel didn't give up on trying to reach Nathan. She showed up unannounced at his office one afternoon, her eyes red from crying. Nathan's assistant intercepted her, calmly informing her that he wasn't available to meet. "Please," Rachel begged, her voice breaking, "just tell him I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." Nathan, watching from his office window, didn't feel anger anymore, just pity. Rachel had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Nathan's new beginning. With Rachel and Ethan out of his life, Nathan focused on rebuilding. He moved into a sleek new apartment downtown, a space that reflected his newfound clarity and independence. The clean lines and open design of the apartment mirrored his determination to leave the past behind. He threw himself into his work, expanding his business and finding renewed purpose. But he also made time for himself, reconnecting with friends and rediscovering the hobbies he had once set aside. One evening, Nathan met with Eric, his private investigator, for a final update. "It's done," Eric said, handing over the last of the documents. "Ethan's in court next week, and Rachel, well, she's struggling, to say the least." Nathan nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Good. They thought they could break me. Instead, they've only proven how strong I am." A chance encounter. Months later, Nathan ran into Rachel at a local grocery store. She was a shadow of her former self, dressed in plain clothes and avoiding eye contact with the other shoppers. When she saw Nathan, her face lit up with a mix of hope and regret. "Nathan," she said, stepping toward him, I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything." Nathan looked at her, his expression calm and unreadable. "I hope you've learned something from all of this," he said simply, before walking away. A sense of peace. That evening, Nathan stood on the balcony of his new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing he had emerged stronger and wiser. Lifting a glass of wine, Nathan made a quiet toast to himself, to truth, to resilience, and to the freedom that comes from letting go of the past. Months turned into a year, and Nathan's life flourished in ways he hadn't imagined. Free from Rachel's deceit and Ethan's schemes, he embraced his new beginning with strength and determination. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far he had come. Rachel's final plea one evening, Nathan received a letter in the mail. It was from Rachel. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky, a far cry from the neat, confident script she once used. He opened it cautiously, not knowing what to expect. Inside, the letter read, "Nathan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I was wrong. About everything. I took you for granted, lied to you, and hurt you in ways I can never take back. You gave me everything, and I threw it away for nothing. I've lost everything now, and I know I deserve it. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I hope you find the happiness I couldn't give you." Nathan set the letter down, staring at it for a moment. He felt no satisfaction in her regret, no joy in her suffering. Instead, he felt nothing. He had moved on. Rachel was no longer a part of his life, and her words, while meaningful, didn't change that. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, choosing not to respond. Ethan's final reckoning. Ethan's legal troubles escalated. By the time his case went to court, he was drowning in debt and disgrace. Nathan made sure to provide the authorities with all the evidence of Ethan's fraudulent activities, ensuring that justice was served. The court found Ethan guilty of multiple charges, including fraud and embezzlement. He was sentenced to several years in prison, and his reputation was beyond repair. For Nathan, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Nathan's new purpose. Nathan's focus shifted from rebuilding his life to helping others. He began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing not just his professional knowledge, but the personal lessons he had learned about resilience and integrity. Through his mentorship, Nathan found a sense of fulfillment that had been missing for years. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. A final goodbye. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Nathan saw Rachel sitting on a bench. She looked tired and worn, her once flawless appearance replaced by a simpler, more humble demeanor. She noticed him but didn't approach, her gaze dropping to the ground. Nathan felt a pang of something, pity perhaps, but it quickly faded. She had made her choices, and he had made his. Without a word, he continued walking, leaving her behind just as he had left her betrayal in the past. A toast to freedom. That evening, Nathan stood on the balcony of his apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand. The city stretched out before him, alive with lights and energy. He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. He thought about everything he had endured, the lies, the heartbreak, the anger. And he thought about everything he had gained, clarity, strength, and freedom. Raising his glass to the night sky, Nathan made one final toast. To lessons learned, to battles won, and to the future. The past no longer held power over him. He was free, and for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. As the city buzzed below, Nathan turned away from the view, ready to face whatever came next. The story of Rachel and Ethan was over. His story, however, was just beginning.